For example, one of my recent experiences has been being in a room with a psychiatrist and another person. We're talking about people who make harmful statements towards a marginalized group and why they might continue doing so. And I said that much like anybody who belongs to a high control, patriarchal, authoritarian religious group, anybody who believes that they are being persecuted and holds a persecution complex might engage in tactics that confirm that bias. And the psychiatrist says, well, were you part of a high control religious group? And I said, yes, I was born Amish. Mind you, I had already told this psychiatrist previously that I was born and raised Amish, but I digress. I don't know if it's a point of like, he didn't hear me when I said I was born and raised Amish. I don't know if it's a point that he didn't understand what that meant when I said I was born and raised Amish. I don't know. But again, I digress. He said immediately, oh, I grew up in a certain state and we used to go buy our butter from the Amish and our furniture. And that's just all I can think of. And I said, stereotype. And he stutters and he says, aren't stereotypes rooted in truth? And I said, well, they might be perhaps, but that's still a stereotype. The butter is a stereotype. The furniture is a stereotype. And the person that was in the room with us having this conversation says, let me explain something to you. Of course, that is what you think. That is what the powerful leaders within the group want you to think because it is beneficial to them. They benefit from that because it's not just a religion. It's also a business. And we went on to have more discourse over this. And the psychiatrist says to me, do Amish people commit crimes? Actually, sir, and I am using that term loosely at this point in time because how am I supposed to respect you when you can't hear the words coming out of my mouth? But again, I digress. I said that when I escaped, I reported the abuse that I experienced. There were 5 people arrested and prosecuted, and they all pled guilty. They were prosecuted for crimes they committed against children. And he looks at me with his face like white as a ghost. And he's like, do they? Well, of course they commit crimes, but do they even commit murder? Why, yes. If y'all haven't heard of Amish people committing murder, look up Eddie Gingerich. Look up Little Boy Blue. Those are the ones that we know about and that I can think of off the top of my head. But there are more people that get unalived inside of Amish communities and even external to Amish communities than just Eddie Gingerich's wife or Little Boy Blue, who was, I think his name was Eli Stutzman, it was his son whom he brutally unalived. The point is that when we hold such a favorable bias, because the narrative has always been controlled by powerful leaders, whether that is decentralized leadership or whether that is because of the core tenets that Jacob Ammon established when him and his followers created what is now formally known as the Amish in the United States and in the world. Regardless of whether that is, that still exists. And that narrative, that nostalgia. Why am I talking about people behavior and how people might engage in certain things and certain actions where they have a confirmation bias and they believe that this is inherently true, that they are being persecuted because people will not allow their harmful rhetoric that causes actual harm and causes risk to marginalized groups of being unalived to remain unchecked. That is not being persecuted. That is people showing compassion and empathy and humanity towards one another. To say it is not okay to spew harmful rhetoric, to say that we can do better than this, to say that this is not the right thing to do, and this in fact causes harm towards this group, why are we then relegated to me listening to somebody's reminiscent, nostalgic idea of Amish butter in the first place? I think Daniela gave me the answer when she said it's charismatic. I like it's charisma by proxy. I think that's the answer. So when we meet these armchair experts, people who believe that proximity, which breeds familiarity, gives them expertise on my lived experiences as an Amish person or other people's lived experiences as Amish people, that gives them authority to speak over us. They have this proximity by, and they believe that familiarity gives them authority to dictate what it means to be Amish and what the Amish experience is. They even believe, and they act in ways that say they believe that their opinion outweighs our lived experiences, and it really doesn't. Your perception of what my lived experiences were doesn't mean anything because I survived those things. It doesn't outweigh my lived experiences. Just because you perceived a certain thing and just because you perceived this wonderful butter or popcorn or furniture or farms or whatever it is that we want to talk about today to use to dismiss or discredit what we're talking about, which we are talking about the fact that there is so much harm that remains and goes unchecked, and the fact that children are suffering. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about people's behavior. We're talking about group behavior. Why do people do the things they do? And I wish I could say that the psychiatrist is an isolated incident, but I literally have been talking about the things that I have witnessed, experienced, and seen my whole life, especially within Amish communities and within Amish homes. And I wish it was only one person that did this. I wish this wasn't a familiar story. I wish that someday the world would stand up and understand that to truly combat child abuse, we have to actually collectively do so within all groups, because child abuse is something that nobody is free from. Let me correct myself. Child abuse is something that no people group is exempt from. There are people groups around the world, and within every people group, you will always have people who commit crimes, including child abuse. We cannot fight child abuse effectively until we engage people from all people groups. The majority of people have to believe that children deserve the right to safety. So how soon can we get there? And why are we still sitting here and derailing conversations about people groups and people behavior and why and what might motivate people to act in certain ways to talk about fucking butter? And what does that say about the person doing that? The person who changes the topic of conversation to talk about butter and furniture. What does that say about you? What kind of values do you have? And does it make you feel superior to me because I grew up Amish? Y'all have a day.